I think I found one of the best businesses that we can buy. This business is tucked away in Pennsylvania, and it does funeral home services, generating $300,000 plus of cash flow every single year. And on top of that, it's been around for over 100 years. Now, it doesn't get more boring and essential than this kind of business. So I've done a bunch of homework and research on this particular business to try to understand and build a thesis of whether or not we should or should not buy this business. And guess who's making the decision? Me and you. So let's rock.
Death, sadly, isn't going away. It's the most recession-proof business out there.
Comforted countless families, nearly 40,000 by their estimate, to comfort people in the fact that life is not.
Even in the business of death, there's still more room for efficiency.
What's up, folks? It is deal time. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Kenny Finance, and I'm the private equity baby where I do nothing but find businesses, buy businesses, and focus on growing them. And I've been doing this for 10 plus years at some of the best private equity firms in the entire world, Blackstone and KKR. And one of the cool things there is all investments have to go through something called an investment committee. That is where the deal teams, the folks that found the deal, have to spend a bunch of time researching the business, understanding if it's a great company, but then they have to present and defend that deal to an investment committee, which consists of all the partners and all the big dogs that say either yes or no on a particular business. Now, look, if you're here, you're part of the Kenny Finance fam, and you know we make nothing but smart money moves. But if you're not a subscriber yet, consider smashing that subscribe button. But today, we are going to have ourselves a smart money committee where we are going to decide as a group whether or not we should buy this company. All right. So for the order of operations here, we're going to touch on a few things. For this committee, we're going to discuss number one, the business overview, as well as how I found this opportunity. Then number two, we're going to touch on a little bit of the value creation thesis and how I think you can grow a business like this. Then three, we're going to touch on some of the key highlights. Number four, the risk. And then at the end, we are going to vote. Like literally all of us are going to vote whether or not we should or should not buy this deal. So let's move into number one, sourcing. So this one's funny. I actually found this business from my Instagram DMs, right? Like, let's pull up this DM. This shows that one of my followers or subscribers, apparently he watched the YouTube, found this business listing on BizBuySell, and he's curious whether or not this is a good deal. So I'll admit, I didn't find this one myself. One of you guys found it and shared it with me, so I'm making a video about it, right? But this came in my DMs, and he gave me a little bit of an overview that, hey, this is in Pennsylvania, doing around 800 grand of revenue, 30% margins plus. Like, is this a good or bad deal? So now, we have the listing, I'm curious, and we're gonna collectively show this subscriber whether or not this is a good or bad deal. So that's how I source this business. Now, what do they actually do? Well, let's get under the hood and try to understand, like, fundamentally, what are the services and products that this business particularly is providing. So when you look at this listing, it says legacy opportunity, premier funeral service business. They're always trying to hype up the name of the listings. So when you think about this actual business, there's a few things that are pretty cool. Number one, it's family owned, meaning that the underlying family owns this company and it's been passed down for 4 generations. Now, when I spoke about that 100-year plus operating history, look at this. This business was founded in 1896. That's kind of crazy. They've been around for literally 130 years, almost. That's pretty nice. They're doing something right. All right. Now, what is the underlying services that they offer? So I did some digging, actually found the website. And what they do is they do end-to-end funeral and memorial services. So they have the chapel as well as rooms for visitation services. They also do some consulting and site selection work to where if a family is trying to prepare and plan for that eventual unfortunate event of passing away, they can have this thing smoothly organized and just follow the motions of the events laid out by this particular provider. So they're providing end-to-end service. So they do the site selection, they help with identifying the caskets, the flowers, everything that you can need to sort of like proceed with having a beautiful passing away service. And they also coordinate with the burial services, the cremation services, the actual cemeteries. If you're a veteran, they also coordinate with the armed forces and things like that. So they kind of handle literally end-to-end everything that's related to the memorial service. So from this business overview, we realize that it is an essential business with a pretty long operating history, and they have a wealth of end-to-end services in this particular niche and industry. That's pretty positive. Now let's touch on the financials. Now look, I'm a numbers geek. I like to get under the hood and try to understand whether or not these businesses are generating cash flow, because even if your service is essential, it has a really good moat and has a really strong purpose and values associated with it. If a business does not generate cash flow, it will not last that long. So let's see like how much they're making. So this business is doing $800,000 of revenue each year and around $260,000 of cash flow. Now let's try to figure out what that margin is. Now for margin, you can either do gross margin, net profit margin, cash flow margin. Let's focus on cash flow margin for a minute. cash flow margin is when you take the amount of cash flow annually that a business generates divided by the annual revenue that it makes per year. So you take that $260,000 divided by $800,000, and that gets you around a 33% cash flow margin. So that's a pretty healthy margin profile for this kind of business. And you can use some of that cash flow to either reinvest into sales and marketing, you can hire more people, or you can use that to acquire other companies as well. So with that kind of margin, it gives you optionality to find ways to grow the business. Now within financials, let's also think about the valuation. So this business, according to the listing, is asking around $1.5 million to purchase the company outright. And that includes the real estate as well. And for private equity investors, when we look at a business, we like to think about the purchase price of the company as a multiple, meaning how much of the cash flow am I buying every single year for this business? So you take the amount of the purchase price, $1.5 million, divided by that annual cash flow, and that gives us a multiple for the purchase price. So that 1.5 divided by 260, that gets you a 5.8 times multiple. And this is really good because it allows for us to benchmark how is the price of this business compared to others that have sold before, as well as that are currently listed, to figure out whether or not we are buying the best and most undervalued business in the space. Because the last thing you want to do is overpay for a business that has the exact same product, quality of service, and team as another business that is trading at a lower multiple. All right, so think about the opportunity cost of your dollars by benchmarking the multiples. So that covers the financials. And as you think about the deal, we're doing it just like how people do it in IC or investment committee at Blackstone. Understand the business, understand the product or service, understand the financials. What are they trading at? What are they asking for the purchase price? And then we want to get into a little bit of the value creation thesis and the diligence and key questions. So now let's pivot to the value creation thesis, to where if we own this business, how can we grow it? Now, I spent about like a few days thinking about the overall funeral service industry and figure out whether or not this is a business where you can go in, scale, and actually double or triple the revenue profile of this particular company. And for that, it requires conversations with other operators, conversations with customers, conversations with consultants in the space, folks that have been in the industry for years, to have perspective on whether or not the playbook for value creation is valid or not. Because I'm telling you now, most of these young buyers today for trying to acquire companies have a very ambitious value creation plan to go into a business that does $100,000 revenue, scale it to $1 million of revenue, use the cash flow to buy more businesses. That's the dream, right? But you got to be feasible. You have to pressure test whether or not your thesis for creating value is valid as well as realistic. So after my conversations with folks in the industry for funeral services across the US, I pinpointed 3 areas for value creation. Number 1, improving marketing. The name of the game is to unlock network effects. And if you get in front of one key buyer that can kick off network effects, I think you can build a sustainable, growing business. So what do I mean by that? Tactically, what you want to do is invest some of your cash flow into having more sales and marketing assets, whether it's social media, whether it's ads, whether it's emails, to get in front of the right people that are making decisions on memorial and funeral services. Because here's what can happen. If you market to the right person and they become a customer, and that customer has a really good experience, that typically could be a generationally sticky customer. And what happens is, after they interact with a positive experience with your service, after using them once for someone that is close to them, all the neighbors, all the relatives, all the coworkers that attended that service as well and experiences a positive, beautiful, intention, quality experience will now have you in the top of their mind when something like this happens in their life or their family as well. Next thing you know it, you have penetrated a community and a geography where you can have generational stickiness because of the attendees of your particular service, vegetation, cremation services, funeral, etc. So the key is very, very, very targeted marketing to the right audience that can trigger those network effects. Now next, community partnerships. This involves having like one key person in the business that is dedicated towards partnerships, like a head of partnerships. Now what could those partnerships be? These could be with churches, community centers, estate lawyers, hospice care providers, anyone that is associated with the discussion around what happens at the event of a death. Plain and simple, because then they can then recommend you as a credible provider for the funeral and memorial services. So instead of relying on folks coming directly to you, you can then be referred to other community members by this partnership network. Now, granted, there might be a revenue share agreement. There might have to be a little bit of investment into events and organizations, but it's very worth it if you can build that referral network. And then the last one is acquisitions. I love M&A. It's where you can buy a business, acquire other businesses, and roll it up. And what you can do is you can acquire other funeral home service providers in neighboring areas to expand your territory. And what I like about this business is that they have a track record of doing that. because they have multi-site and they've been able to extend their coverage as well as not diluting the quality of service. But not just horizontally acquiring other funeral service providers. You can also vertically integrate and acquire flower shop providers to where the flowers that are used at the visitations and funeral memorial services, you can own that business as well as some of the groundkeeping and maintenance providers at the actual cemeteries. So that way you can have a full end-to-end value chain of the funeral and memorial service industry. That's pretty impressive. So now that we've walked through the financials as well as my preliminary valuation thesis, which by the way, I'm pressure testing every single day with folks in the industry to figure out if this is a real thesis or not. Next, I start to formulate some of my key questions that I have for the owners. Because when you're buying a business, typically if things go well, you have an opportunity to have a really big meeting with the owner or seller of the business where you can ask him or her everything that is on your mind and heart about owning that business. And typically, you want to do very, very, very deep diligence to prepare for that meeting to understand what are the 3 to 5 most important questions that are needle moving to help me decide whether or not I want to buy or acquire this business. Now, if what you learned so far, you have like a burning question, put that in the comments. That's like going to help the community. But for me, there's 3 questions. Actually, I wrote them down. So the first one is the percent of the business that is from pre-need services. Now, what are pre-need services? That means that you are working with a family that is proactively planning for death services. So they're not reacting after someone passes away to then call you and try to set something up. Instead, they are calling you to purchase the site ahead of time, which are pretty expensive and you kind of want to lock those in early, as well as planning for particular coordination of having family members located together. They're also calling about preparing for different types of tombstones or flowers or things like that, to where things are pre-booked and it's already an existing customer. And then it's about when life events happen, executing on the rest of those services. That's pretty good because you are a long-term sticky relationship. And I want to see a business that has a lot of pre-need services already booked up. Now, the next one, this is a really, really, really important question, is the mix of revenue from cremation versus burial. Now, that's really important because both of those services, one has sort of like an opportunity or a TAM, as well as very, very, very different revenue characteristics. And I'll touch on this later in the video, but I'll give you guys a quick sneak peek. Cremation services has a significantly lower revenue per service versus burial. So it's important for us to diligence that as we consider sort of the growth profile of this business. And then my last one is diligencing the licensing and compliance in this industry. I want to make sure that whoever is running the business on a day-to-day has the appropriate licenses, and we are compliant with Pennsylvania laws when it comes to funeral directors as well as other essential services. So we got to make sure that the licensing is in place. Now let's touch on the key things that I like, aka the highlights of this opportunity. All right, number 1, long operating history. You guys saw it. They've been around since the 1800s. Like, there's only a handful of businesses that have successfully been able to operate at 100 plus years of operating history with consistently good results, strong brand loyalty, as well as consistently top tier service for that community. And if they've been here for the last 100 years, I think they'll probably be around for the next 100 to 200 years. Okay. I hope so. Now, the next highlight is the multi-site track record as well. This is really important to see because typically this is like a one-person shop with one visitation center and maybe like one van that does the transportation. But this one has multi-site, meaning that they have crushed their playbook in their core region, as well as expanded that into the next particular geography or the next site. And they've done that without deteriorating or sacrificing the quality of service or their brand loyalty. So they have a playbook of expanding successfully. That is very important. So they can grow. We'll just keep doing that, like add more capital to grow into more and more sites because they've done it already. And then the last one is, think about the tailwinds of this business. There are very clear tailwinds, meaning people are going to unfortunately keep passing away. Folks might live longer, etc., but naturally it's just the progression of life, right? But the availability of sites, the availability of providers that execute on these services is pretty finite. So what you have is growing demand paired with a fixed supply or number of providers and cemetery sites. That's a really good formula for underlying business. Like, look at this chart right here. It's kind of cool. This shows that the trend in cemetery plot prices has been through the roof, meaning that if you were to buy like cemetery plots where you want to be buried when you pass away, it has been one of the best assets you could purchase. Better than inflation, which grows at 4%. Better than home prices, which have grown at like 8%. This has grown at almost an 11% over the last 6 years. It's one of the best performing asset classes. Better than stocks, real estate, and inflation. So with that thing coming in mind, that also applies to the funeral service providers as well as the businesses operating in this supply chain, is that they are benefiting from increased pricing and better margins because of this macro tailwind. So those are the key highlights that I think are pretty neat about why I like this business. Now let's talk about some of the risk. These are 3 simple things, but important things to understand. Number 1 is the 4th generation family legacy type of point. If you've been around for 4 generations, odds are you got some cousin, some aunt, some brother, some sibling integrated into that business. And I'll tell you right now, buying a family business that has the family implanted into so many different pieces of the business can be really, really tricky if you're not a family member. There's emotional things, there are legal things, there's a bunch of skeletons that you gotta look out for when it's a long-term generational family business. All right? Because you can't make everyone happy and it'll be tough. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is the cremation revenue mix. Like, this is really important because I guarantee you that this business over the last 100-year operating history had a bunch of burial services as the revenue mix. Now, burial sites are very fixed. We're running out of land and running out of space. What happens? Folks are pivoting towards a cheaper alternative, which is cremation services. Now, the issue is, if the operating history of this business has been banking on burial services, and the future growth is banking on cremation services, a low revenue per service type of item, the financial profile might be misled based on what we're seeing, right? Like this $800,000 of revenue per year, if we pivot to 100% cremation, which might happen because of the supply and demand dynamics, might become like a $600,000, $500,000 business, unless we get a bunch more cremation service customers. So that revenue mix is really important for us to understand. And if it is heading towards cremation, that's a little difficult to underwrite. And then the last one is a significant part of the purchase is also the real estate, like the chapel, the visitation centers. And with the real estate, I'm not a real estate investor. I'm a private equity guy, right? So we just want to make sure that this business is intact, in good condition, and doesn't require a bunch of CapEx and upgrades to keep the business afloat, as well as to sustain more demand. Because you could be buying a business for $1.5 million, but you might have to spend another $2 to $3 million getting the building up to shape to be able to handle the future demand that you want to get from this business. So those are some of the key risks. So with those risks in mind, like I asked myself, is the business worth $1.5 million? Like, is this the right price to buy this company at? And I'm telling you right now, at $1.5 million, at a 5.7, 5.8 times multiple, that is very expensive. As compared to like other opportunities where most small businesses trade at like 3 to 4, 3 to 5 times. So this is really expensive. And there are other listings that have similar size and profiles at a cheaper price. Like, look at this business that we found. This one is based in Texas, and they do 33% margins, 10 employees, and it has $1.8 million of purchase price with around $600,000 of cash flow. That represents around a 3 times multiple, right? So if this one is almost identical in a different geography, asking for a 3 times multiple. Granted, some things might be very different operationally or history-wise, and this one's asking for almost a 6 times. Like, why is this double? So let's keep this very like fundamental minded, because I've outlined everything fundamentally you should think about as like Warren Buffett trained value investor private equity type. Like, would I actually buy this business at $1.5 million? I don't think so. Like, let me know in the comments, like, I'll give you like 3 seconds to just, right? Like, let me know, like, would you guys buy it at $1.5 million? I'm leaning towards no, because the future of the financial profile of this business could be drastically different. The real estate might be in pretty bad shape, and there's very tough things to have a bunch of confidence in. But at a $1 million purchase price, right? Like, do my diligence, present an offer that is a little bit less than what they're asking. And by the way, you can do that. Just like buying a house, you'd have to buy it at exactly what it's listed at. You can get and present an offer for a lower price. So at a $1 million purchase price, where it's like, I don't know, a 3.5, 3.8 times multiple, that might be a little bit more reasonable. So I would submit an offer and say, hey, I'm willing to buy this business, but only at a $1 million purchase price. But I'd love to continue to negotiate and see where we can shake out. So it's a negotiation, and I'm not a negotiation like professor, but you can read some resources on that. But always remember, you don't have to buy it at exactly what they're offering at. So I will be a buyer at $1 million purchase price. 1.5, maybe not, because that multiple is just like, that's very expensive. So look, that's my point of view. Others might have a different opinion, but look, with me and my risk capital, I am willing to only pay $1 million for this business, given the highlights, thesis, everything that I laid out. But that is the investment committee process of how private equity and professional investors get deals done. It's a series of asking questions and hunting for the right answers to figure out, is it the right business to buy at what particular price? That's all we do. So if you guys enjoyed being voting members of the Smart Money Investing Committee, do me a really big favor and smash that like button. It means the world to me as well as the rest of the community. And guess what? If you're interested in figuring out and learning more how to think like a pro when it comes to investing, this funeral service business is just one of a bunch in a series of businesses that I'm evaluating. Like this last one was sandblasting. That's right, spraying old buildings and pieces of equipment until it's like super raw and fresh for you to paint over it, like super boring, but recurring essential service that does a bunch of cash flow. I think like $500,000 plus. So if you enjoyed this video, I think you would definitely like this next one and check out that review and vote on that one as well and let me know. I'll catch you guys on the next one and keep making smart money moves, baby. Peace.